Well, Saturday, Wisconsin will invade Tuscaloosa to see the Crimson Tide. The Badgers, of course, rocking that 2-0 record to start the season, but we have to remember what happened just a year ago when these two met. Alabama rolled into Madison and left with a 42-10 beating on Wisconsin. Maybe it's a different time this time around. Let's just say a few things have changed because the Tide, of course, looking different in year two under DeBoer, while the Badgers might have a defense, and also we'll see what Lou Fickell and the crew can do. Joining us now for this matchup from 24/7 Sports, both sides of this argument, Nick Osen as well as Mike Rodak here, who will see that matchup on Saturday. But Nick, I'll start with you. When it comes to the Badgers, it always comes to what Fickell and how they can sit up here and maybe do better than that 5-7 mark a year ago. Off to a good start, as I mentioned, 2 straight wins. How is this group maybe taking that turn in 2025 for you?
Yeah, Brandon, absolutely. I would really point to a couple aspects. First of all, I understand it doesn't always translate to wins and losses. But I think finally, with really a locker room full of Fickell's guys and people that really kind of understand now the foundation and these team goals, I think the culture is really in a better spot. And number two, you alluded to it a little bit early, Brandon, the defense. I think you're finally seeing some aspects of what you maybe saw at Cincinnati, some beefier guys up front. The interior defensive line has been good. There's been more pass pressure, and really on the outside linebackers, you're going to see a couple potential pros, certainly one in Mason Riger, a Louisville transfer whose biggest issue throughout the last couple of years has just been health. And now he's there. He has provided pass pressure in both games. I've been really impressed with what he has done, and they're deep, guys. You could probably trust 5-6 guys at those outside spots. Last year in the matchup against the Tide, pass rush just wasn't necessarily there for the Badgers on top of some of the injuries. So this year, I'm looking forward to seeing what they can do against Kalen DeBoer's offense.
We will see on the opposite side here, Mike, Ryan Williams. We saw what happened week 1, the concussion there. What's the latest you can talk about one of their weapons there on the Tide?
Yeah, it seemed like he was pretty close to going in week 2 against ULM. I mean, he was in a helmet, in uniform, in pads for pregame warmups. And so when you're talking about a concussion, if you're wearing a helmet, that's usually a pretty good sign that you're pretty close to being ready to go. So I don't know if Kalen DeBoer will officially say that he's ready to go between now and game time on Saturday. And I think an important thing to keep in mind is that Alabama doesn't have to put out an availability report this week. It's a non-conference game for them. Meanwhile, Wisconsin does, because the Big Ten's policy requires them to. So it might be something where Alabama could kind of let this go until kickoff, but I'm leaning towards him being able to play. I think the bigger question for Alabama is how much does Ryan Williams play? And when he does play, how effective is he? Because he was not that effective in week 1. He has not really had a big game really going back until last September, the Georgia game. This is a player that at this point feels like he has something to prove. Jeremy Bernard has been the #1 receiver for Alabama, and if Ryan Williams does play, there's definitely something left out there for him to prove this weekend.
Yeah, and really kind of jumping off of Mike's point, based on obviously some of his reporting, what he had said, and certainly what I have read with some of that kind of progress, I'd be a little surprised if the Badgers don't have to face Williams. And with that, on top of some of Bernard's skill set and really what he has shown, which I've been frankly impressed with, it's going to be a pretty important task for the Wisconsin secondary. That's a spot that is older in a couple areas, specifically Rico Holman at corner and the safety duo I really like. But Middle Tennessee last week did get a deep shot or two, so those will be a couple areas to really watch. I think Wisconsin will be better prepared, certainly, though, going against Williams this fall compared to last September.
Speaking of Wisconsin, of course, here, Nick, you think about it, Billy Edwards dealing with that sprained knee in terms of playing against Bama. We still don't know. You still have Danny O'Neal. But if it's either one of those QBs, how would this offense look against Bama?
Yeah, Brandon, that's been a really intriguing storyline. And frankly, even though Danny O'Neal has been kind of coming in as the backup, right? Billy Edwards has played a lot of football. People forget that Danny O'Neal was actually a true freshman starting quarterback at his last spot. So I think he is really impressed. And within that offense, whoever it is, but I think based on a lot of what we've heard, and we got to speak with O'Neal this week, I think it's really a couple aspects. You're going to look for a little bit more improved run game, maybe than we've seen the first couple of games. And one thing that has been really strong, Brandon, that you don't always see within a Badgers offense is spreading the ball around. I think Jeff Grimes, as the OC, has done a terrific job 8 different pass catchers last week, 8 or 9, 6 different wide receivers, 3 different wideouts scoring touchdowns, plus a couple other players getting in on the action. Danny O'Neill's been really good, had the best performance ever for a first game Wisconsin starter in Badgers history. So I personally think he's a gamer. It's going to be really intriguing, while also acknowledging the Tide have a lot of talent, especially at corner, so maybe not as many deep shot potential as we've seen the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, and for Alabama, I think they know that they don't know who the quarterback will be for Wisconsin, but they do know that there's going to be a new offensive coordinator. So whatever the case may be at quarterback, they're preparing for a different offense than what they saw last year up in Madison. And that's, it's a different story on defense. Alabama knows what they're seeing on the defensive end from Wisconsin, but you don't really know what to expect on offense. And you go back to the Florida State game a couple weeks ago, they didn't know what to expect from Gus Malzahn and that offense, and that was a little bit of an issue for this defense. So I think playing fast, playing confident, not being hesitant, that was a big word that came out of that Florida State game on defense. Just trusting what you see in front of you and not overthinking it is going to be a big point of emphasis for this defense. But this defense also wants to get after the quarterback better. Only 1 sack through 2 games for Alabama's defense. Granted, I think the 4th fewest pass attempts against them so far. But this is a defense that really feels like it has something to prove after what happened in week 1. And they want to get after the quarterback. And they just really want to show that they can play with effort and intensity and physicality, which is something they did not do with their loss down in Tallahassee.
Mike, I tell you what, I feel like this entire season is going to always go back to that week 1. But when you look at the rest of the schedule, it feels like they're almost in that win now territory. Of course, this game against Wisconsin. But you look at the rest of the schedule, especially in October, a gauntlet of games in terms of maybe need to win now. I mean, take a look at it. We used to say back in the day, Vandy, okay, that's easy. That didn't happen last year. You got Missouri, Tennessee, South Carolina, LSU, Oklahoma, and then, of course, the Iron Bowl at the end. Is it getting dangerous where it's like every week you have to win if you want to be part of the conversation?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, I think Alabama can afford 1 more loss, and that puts them at 2 losses. And, we saw what happened last year when they had 3 losses. They were left out of the playoff, and there was the big conversation about strength of schedule and counting losses. But I don't think you can sit there with 3 losses in early December and say, we feel good about the playoffs. So at most, I think you can afford 1 more. And like you said, it's a very tough schedule from here on out for Alabama. And you have to go to Georgia in a couple weeks. And you could be sitting there with 2 losses going into October if you don't play well enough in that game. So that's the SEC. That's what Alabama faces. That's what Kalen DeBoer faces. And I think for them, the biggest thing is just sustaining their momentum and sustaining their intensity week after week. This was a team that got punched in the mouth against Florida State. They got ripped apart by fans that entire week, and they came out and they played with their hair on fire against ULM. They won 73-0. But do they get complacent? Do they kind of roll back to their old habits, or can they sustain this week in and week out? And that's really going to be the story of their season, because this is an Alabama team that began as a top 10 team. They're certainly talented enough, but can they just keep it going week to week and not lose the games that they lost last year?
Nick, this is the part of the show where I'm going to allow you guys to pick the winner in this one, and I'll start with you. Of course, this one kicks off at 12, but 4 p.m. Eastern Saturday. Who do you see as the winner?
Yeah, Brandon, it's a huge test for Wisconsin. Obviously, I think that the Badgers are playing good football. I wish there was maybe a touch more clarity on some of the offensive line changes, as well as QB, but just with Bama having to come back after that week 1 loss, younger aspect of some of the offense in Wisconsin, and just the fact that it is at Bryant-Denny, where Bama hasn't lost in a long, long time going against an unranked team. I think the Badgers cover. I think they play a good game, but I'd have to give the edge to the host Tide in this one as of now.
Yeah, and same thing here. I think Alabama wins, pretty comfortably. I think I have them winning by about 20 points, which is a spread on this. And look, this is a team that plays very confident at home. We saw that even last year. It's really the road. I think that's the bigger question for Alabama right now. But when they're at home, when they feel that energy, when they get the support from the fans, when they get rolling, this can be a very hard team to beat. If there's one area where I'd be a little bit concerned for Alabama, it is the center of their defensive line. They're down their top defensive tackle, Tim Keenan. I still doubt that he'll play Saturday, especially with the bye week coming up. So if Wisconsin can kind of get some push up the middle, if they get their run game going, maybe there's a chance for the Badgers to pull off an upset. But overall, I don't see this Wisconsin team being able to come into Tuscaloosa and beat an Alabama team that's still playing pretty angry right now.
Alabama, 83 straight home wins, as Nick mentioned there. That is a streak that we have not seen in quite some time, and we'll see if it happens there on Saturday. Nick and Mike, appreciate your time breaking this down. We'll see how this pans out on Saturday, but taking a look at it again, the matchup at noon Eastern, Wisconsin seeking to be 3-0 for the first time since 2019. Alabama, take a look at it, 7-4 versus unranked teams under DeBoer. That is not good, something we're not accustomed to. And Alabama also have won 83 games, as I mentioned, versus unranked teams when it's at the crib.